Hey everyone, Nubkeks here, and in today's video we're taking a look at the Brewmaster Monk on the Shadowlands beta for World of Warcraft. Yesterday we looked at the Windwalker, and tomorrow we're going to be looking at the Mistweaver. And of course we've already looked at several classes, and we'll be looking at every single spec and class here on the Shadowlands beta, and seeing how they're turning out. So yeah, I hope that you guys will enjoy all that content coming your way. Without any further ado though, let us dive in and take a look at the Brewmaster Monk. All right, and here we are in game. We're meditating. We're getting comfy because there's a lot of nice stuff to cover here for the Brewmaster. There's a lot going on. What we're going to do is we're going to begin taking a quick look at the core rotation of the Brewmaster, especially for people that are looking at a new spec to pick up or who haven't played their Brewmaster in a little while, just as sort of a refresher, a recap of what sort of the core gameplay is of the spec. After that, we'll of course dive into the new stuff. And there's quite a bit of new stuff. In fact, we're going to end up covering some of the new things in the core rotation because that actually has been affected in quite a big way. So maybe a little bit of repeat in this video compared to the other ones, but I hope that you guys will enjoy it anyway. I mean, certainly give me feedback on how you like it being handled or anything you'd like to see differently in terms of that stuff. But let's dive in, right? Let's go. So, Brewmaster. First thing we want to touch on, we're a tank, so how does our active mitigation work? How are we controlling our damage? The way this works for the Brewmaster, the way it works is we have something called stagger, where physical attacks that you take are, instead of just going straight to you, like if you get hit for 100 damage, instead of taking 100 damage, with stagger, you might take 60 damage, and then 40 of that damage is going to happen as a dot over 10 seconds, right? So you're sort of delaying that damage. In fact, you'll see, especially in the dungeon footage at the end of the video, or halfway through the video even, you'll see that we have a stagger bar, and that will fill up as that stagger dot becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. All right, so that's a big part of how we're delaying damage and how we are tanky. Then, this is actually new in Shadowlands, but essentially we have a thing called shuffle as well. This makes your stagger more effective, and this is very simple. Just doing your core rotation, keg smash, blackout kick, spinning crane kick, just doing that core stuff is going to just keep up shuffle, right? You know, it's basically going to be up 100% of the time in combat. You don't really have to worry about it. You can see the shuffle dots over here. Just doing my core rotation will maintain it. No problem really at all. So yeah, it's just going to always be there. Your stagger's more effective, so that's something just to bear in mind. This was the old in BFA, right? If you're coming from BFA, this was Iron Skin Brew. This was actually an active button that you had to press. But it's kind of a bit boring because you just kept it up 100% of the time. That wasn't great. They've removed that, and now it is entirely passive. We have two new buttons for active mitigation then. Or, well, not new, but slightly changed. But Purifying Brew, this is the one you're pressing more often. Has about a 13-second recharge. Actually, do I have... No, I don't. Okay, good. I had a talent for the dungeon that we just ran where it was reducing the cooldowns. But 13-second recharge reduced by haste. We have two charges. This will clear half of the damage that is currently being delayed by your stagger, right? And this does interact then with the next bit, so that's cool. But I mean, again, this is just a button you're going to be pressing quite often. It's reactive, so like you take a big hit or a few big hits, your stagger is building up. You can help lower it back down with Purifying Brew. Pretty cool. Celestial Brew then, this is new, and this is a really big deal. Has a 30-second cooldown by default. So we get a strong brew that coalesces purified chi, escaping your body into a celestial guard, absorbing 7,000 damage. And this is where the interaction comes in. When you purify stagger with your purifying brew, that will add up into your celestial brew shield and make it more powerful, up to 200% more powerful. So, I mean, baseline is 7,000 shields already really good. This lasts for 8 seconds. And when you purify, it gets even stronger. It can go up to like 21,000 at this gear level. I have 17,000 health right now, so if this could be a 21,000 max health shield, that's kind of insane. So this is really strong. And yeah, this is a big part of your active mitigation. And of course, stagger only works against physical damage, so this is how you'll deal with magical damage, that sort of stuff. Okay, well, these cooldowns might seem a bit long. Well, maybe not Purified Brew, but certainly Celestial Brew seems like a pretty long cooldown. Well, your core rotation is going to interact with this, and it's going to have an impact. Your most important ability in your core rotation is Keg Smash. This has a 7.2 second cooldown with this level of haste, 12% haste. 15-yard range. This does cost 40 energy. We have our energy bar. It's not too important compared to a Windwalker, but it's there. But this spends your energy. It will smash a keg. doing about 660 damage to all enemies within 8 yards, reducing their movement speed by 20% for 15 seconds. It will also, again, be your main way to generate shuffle, which you don't really need to think about too much. And more importantly, I suppose, it will reduce the remaining cooldown of your brews by 4 seconds. So Celestial Brew and Purifying Brew in particular. So for example, bam, I keg smash, the cooldown goes down. Pretty nice, right? Again, this does plenty of damage, lots of AoE damage, and reduces the cooldown of your brews. So this is the most important thing to keep on cooldown. We also have Breath of Fire. This has no cost. It's just a 15-second cooldown. Rar. And yeah, this interacts with your keg smash as well. This will do 219 fire damage in an AoE in front of you, that Breath of Fire. And for targets that have been affected by your keg smash, that 15-second move speed reduction you put on them, it will set them on fire, making them take more damage over time, and reducing the damage they deal to you by 5% for the 12 seconds that the fire dot is ticking. So, nice little interaction there. Then we also have Tiger Palm. This is how we're going to dump energy outside of Keg Smash. Tiger Palm, it does a very small amount of damage, and it also reduces the cooldown of your brews by 1 second. So again, helping you get more of those brews out. We also have a thing called Blackout Kick, which also generates shuffle. It also does 470 physical damage. So, you know, better, a decent source of damage. And again, you're going to want to use this on cooldown, otherwise you'll run out of energy. So yeah, just another thing to weave in there into your rotation. So pretty simple in that sense. Keg Smash on cooldown, Breath of Fire to set them on fire. Sorry, you want to do your Blackout Kick on cooldown then, and sort of fill in with your Tiger Palms. Blackout Kick. We're going to be Tiger Palming. Tiger Palming. We've actually run out of energy here. We'll go into a Blackout Kick. We'll Keg Smash. With Breath of Fire, with Blackout Kick, and be Tiger Palming a bit more. So that's sort of the core rotation, and again, all that interacting with your brew cooldowns. There is a new ability actually in Shadowlands called Spinning Crane Kick. So the same energy cost as Tiger Palm, and this just does AoE damage. This is how you're going to fill in sort of AoE. However, it doesn't reduce the cooldown on your brews, so not really relevant in single target, but in multi-target, this is going to be your sort of your main way to dump your energy when you're not using those other abilities. And yeah, there you are. Okay, major defensive cooldowns then, because they are obviously extremely important for a tank. You have Fortifying Brew. This 7-minute cooldown, again, gets cooldown reduction from all the brew reducing things, right? It's a 15-second buff, increases your current maximum health by 20%, reduces all damage you take by 20%, and makes Stagger 10% more effective. So a nice, solid defensive cooldown there. Pretty straightforward. You go all grey and stony. You have Zen Meditation. So this is a channeled ability. It reduces all damage you take by 60% for 8 seconds, but if you're hit by a melee attack or you do anything else, this will cancel the effect. You can actually, there's a perk for Shadowlands where you can move while you're casting this, so you can move around. But yeah, so obviously if you're fighting a boss, they're just going to melee you and break it out. So there are going to be sort of more niche uses of this, but I mean, you can, for example, roll away and channel your Zen Meditation and get some damage reduction out. Good to reduce stagger damage if you're taking a lot, or good against big magic hits. Like if a boss is a big fireball, you could block it with Zen Med, that sort of stuff, right? I just mentioned roll there. So roll is your primary movement thing, has 2 charges. Roll the short distance, pretty nice. There's a few other things here that are new that I don't want to cover, so I'm going to avoid anything that's new. We'll cover that in the new section. What else do we have? Oh, this is also an important part of your core kit, Crackling Jade Lightning. This does tiny bit of damage. This is really just for tagging mobs that are far away, so that's how you pull something that's like 30 yards away or 40 yards away. Crackling Jade Lightning, kind of cool. You have Vivify, so this is sort of a kiting tool. You can heal yourself. This is not part of your core rotation. You can't like dodge, which is a really important thing for Brewmaster. You dodge a lot, and your mastery does tie into dodging. So whenever you're hit by melee attack or you do your Blackout Kick, you generate a stack which increases your next dodge until your next successful dodge. So you dodge a lot, right? You can't dodge while you're casting. So this is again more of a thing if you're kiting away. You could heal yourself with Vivify, like while you're out of range of mobs if you're kiting. So kind of cool, like because Keg Smash does a slow. Yeah, a couple other utility things. Obviously, you got a normal kick. You have an AoE stun, which is slightly 1 yard bigger than it was in BFA. You've got Paralysis, which is a single target in cap on a 45-second cooldown. You have Taunt. Already covered roll, and yeah, there's another few things, but again, they are new things. I think we've covered everything baseline. Our other big defensive cooldown is new, by the way, and that's Invoke New Zao, so we'll cover that in the new section. I think we've covered quite a lot there. But yeah, that is sort of the core gameplay of the Brewmaster Monk. So you're going to be using your Gonna be using your purifying celestial brew quite often. Whenever you get good damage, you're going to be, or you're taking lots of stagger damage, you're going to reduce it with your purifying brew. You're going to be keg smashing on cooldown. You're going to be using breath of fire to ignite that keg smash on cooldown. You're going to be doing your blackout kick on cooldown as well to generate more shuffle. And then you're going to be filling in with Tiger Palm most of the time in single target, or you're going to be filling in with spinning crane kick in AoE. And that's sort of your core rotation there. There you go. All right, guys. Well, let's dive into what's new then about the Brewmaster Monk, because there's quite a few big changes here actually coming into the spec, which is going to adjust sort of the way that you play a relatively large amount, actually. So, first big change, Stagger no longer affects magical damage. Right, Stagger's your main form of one of your main forms of mitigation, where damage gets delayed, turns into a dot instead. That doesn't affect magic anymore. This is only for physical hits. All right. Next big change, which I've already covered, but let's go over it again if you didn't check out the recap section. But Iron Skin Brew, which was your main source of active mitigation in BFA, is gone. It is now a passive thing called Shuffle, where your damaging abilities, Keg Smash, Blackout Kick, and Spinning Crane Kick, are going to generate Shuffle. You don't really need to worry about this too much. It's just up all the time, just passively, right? You don't need to be too concerned. So long as you are in combat and hitting things, you have Shuffle active, and Shuffle increases the effectiveness of Stagger by 75%. It's the old Iron Skin Brew, just always up passively. Well, what do we do then if Iron Skin Brew is gone? Well, what's our active mitigation? You have now Purifying Brew and Celestial Brew. So Purifying Brew has 2 charges. You clear half the damage delayed with Stagger, right? And this will also power up your Celestial Brew. Celestial Brew is a very, very potent damage absorb shield based off of the old guard spell. You chug your brew, it's going to absorb 7,000 damage. And it gets more powerful, in fact, up to 200% more powerful based off of the damage that you've purified from your Stagger with your Purifying Brew. So yeah, that's sort of your active mitigation model. You're constantly staggering damage. You have to choose when you want to purify that Stagger. When it gets, well, there's not a huge amount of choice in the sense that, you know, whenever your Stagger bar gets high, you're going to purify it. And then you're going to be using Celestial Brew to protect you from magic, which otherwise you've no protection from. Or again, just to provide a very big damage shield, you know, whenever you need it. So certainly in comparison to BFA, which I think was very smooth. Like in BFA, you're just using your charges on Iron Skin Brew. And then you would very, very rarely be able to purify. So it was a very smooth damage pattern. I do expect in Shadowlands, and this is been my experience a bit so far as well, that you're a bit more spiky actually in Shadowlands, right? They're just expecting that you're shuffling, you're staggering stuff just constantly all the time. You're purifying a lot more frequently. And then the Celestial Brew does become this very big spike of survivability. You know, you feel extremely strong when Celestial Brew comes off cooldown. It feels incredibly powerful, and it is incredibly powerful. Though you do feel a little bit weaker then once it wears off and you're waiting for that cooldown to come back. You're going to feel more weak than you did as a monk in BFA, for example. You're more reliant on that bit of a spike your cooldown there. Of course, the cooldowns of these get reduced by your Keg Smash, get reduced by your Tiger Palm, yada yada. So, I mean, their cooldowns aren't as long as they seem. You can check out the dungeon footage at the end to get a feel for how often those cooldowns are coming up. It should be about like every 20 seconds or so for Celestial Brew, and maybe every like 10 seconds or so for Purifying Brew. Something along those lines. You'll see though when you check out the footage. Another cool change is Spinning Crane Kick is here now as well for the Brewmaster Monk, coming from Windwalker and Mistweaver, in fact. So it's there for Brewmaster too. And this is your AoE filler, right? So you're still going to be doing your Keg Smashes, your Breath of Fires, and your Blackout Kicks. Tiger Palm is what you're going to be doing in single target. It does low mana damage for 25 energy, reduce the cooldown of your brews. Spinning Crane Kick, though, it does 300 physical damage right now, over 1.3 seconds to all enemies within 8 yards. So no target cap for Brewmaster, funnily enough, though they may add that. But yeah, so yeah, basically, if you're in AoE, you're going to fill with Spinning Crane Kick. It's going to give you just more consistent AoE damage, more consistent AoE threat. So a really pleasant addition to the Brewmaster kit. Feels very, very welcome for sure. Next up, we have a new defensive/damage cooldown. Every single monk spec is getting their own invoke spell of a celestial that matches their specialization. For the Brewmasters, that's New Zao, the Black Ox. It's a 3-minute cooldown. This used to formerly be a talent, now it's baseline. You summon an effigy of New Zao, the Black Ox, for 25 seconds. He will attack your primary target, and he will frequently stomp, damaging all nearby enemies for a little bit of damage, plus 25% of stagger damage recently purified. So pretty nice, you know, by by using your active indication, your Purifying Brew properly, you'll make Niu Zhao do more damage. On top of that, while active, 25% of damage delayed by stagger is instead staggered by Niu Zhao. So yeah, also not only being a damage cooldown and working with your active mitigation, but this guy also is going to be a defensive cooldown, making you tankier while he's out. So we summon in our boy Niu Zhao. Rawr, he's going to charge in and he's going to stomp and he's going to have a great time just smacking dudes. So Niu Zhao, it's your new best friend for Shadowlands. There he is. He's pretty cool. All right, next up, one cool utility thing here, and a bit of a change. In BFA, your taunt, provoke, increased the move speed of the target when you taunted them. So you would taunt bosses and mobs, and they'd run towards you very quickly. That's now gone. It's just a normal taunt ability, just taunts, that's it. Right, no move speed attached. However, you have a new ability, or returning ability, called Clash. This has an 8 to 30 yard range with a 30-second cooldown. You and the target charge each other, meeting halfway, and then rooting all targets within 6 yards for 4 seconds. So I'll do it against this target dummy. Obviously, it's a target dummy. It can't move. So, you know, against a mob, obviously the mob would run towards me, and we'd meet halfway. So this is really nice. I think this is awesome. Obviously, there were pros and cons to provoke increasing movement speed. I think that Clash being its own unique ability is a lot more fun, though. Obviously, you can use this, like, move mobs out of, like, bad stuff on the floor, like whatever Sanguine, for example, is on the floor in Mythic Plus. You can use Clash to pull them out of it, which I think is awesome. It gives you a bit of mobility as well. And obviously the AoE route that it's going to do as well, it's a relatively small radius, but that's still pretty useful. You could use that for some kiting strategies and stuff like that. So I think that Clash is a very exciting thing to have there, a really useful bit of utility to add to the Brewmaster's kit. So I think I'm very happy, I think, with that change. I think that's awesome. Another cool thing we have here coming in is Touch of Death. This is awesome, right? This is awesome. So this is now baseline for all monk specs. It's a 3-minute cooldown. You exploit the enemy target's weakest point, instantly killing creatures if they have less health than you. And obviously, as a Brewmaster Monk, we've got a fair chunk of health. Deals damage equal to 35% of your maximum health against players and stronger creatures, so elites. And that can only be done under 15% health. So, you know, against bosses and things like that, it's going to be like an execute ability that does a really, really good chunk of damage. So that feels really good, I think. This is super fun, great for world questing, great in Mythic Plus, great, just great everywhere. It's just a really fun ability. On top of that, there is a rank 2 of this that you get at level 52 while you're leveling up in Shadowlands, which is just for the Brewmaster, that will clear stagger based on 200% of the damage you deal. Obviously, that's a massive amount. Like, if you're going to do 35% of your maximum health as damage, I mean, it's going to purify stagger equal to, you know, 2/3 of your maximum health. Like, it clears an absolute ton of stagger, so you can certainly use it for that. So definitely some creative uses that you can do with the Brewmaster. All right, next up we have Expel Harm. I think this is actually already baseline for Brewmaster. Can't remember, but this is a weird one. I feel like this one is still, it's been slightly changed as far as I know for Brewmaster. It's a bit weird. Certainly it's weird for all monk specs. This just seems radically undertuned for all monk specs, and it kind of doesn't make any sense. But anyway, it costs 15 energy, has a 5-second cooldown. Expel negative chi from your body, healing for 684, and dealing 10% of the amount healed as nature damage to a single enemy within 8 yards. It also, for Brewmaster, draws in positive chi of all the healing spheres that you've left on the ground to increase the healing of Expel Harm. So this does barely any healing, and like, if you look at this, like my melee attacks, for example, are just passively hitting for 600. Like Tiger Palm, my filler ability, is hitting for that much. So this is the thing. Expel Harm, it hit that for 48 damage. The damage is minuscule. Like, it almost might as well not be there. So it's quite weird. I guess, like, this is pretty much, as of right now, pending tuning. Like, maybe if it gets tuned up, it could be useful. Right now, it's purely a thing to suck in healing spheres, like if you get rooted or something, and can't pick them up by walking over them. So it's a bit of a strange one. But, like, it's there. Anyway, we'll see. It has a very short GCD, as you can see, too. I don't know. It's odd. Okay, and then a couple of other changes. One thing is maybe a nerf, maybe perk, but certainly affects your core rotation a bit, which is that Blackout Kick now has a longer... Oh, Blackout Kick is instead of Blackout Strike, but they're basically the same thing. But it has a longer cooldown. It has a 4-second cooldown now. So, for example... Well, let's just show you, like, Blackout Kick. I can Tiger Palm, Tiger Palm, Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick. So it's not as core a part of your rotation. You're going to be doing more abilities in between Blackout Kicks than you were in BFA. So I actually think the rotation flows really smoothly. I think it works out just great the way it is. So I actually think this feels just fine. And the Blackout Kick just yeah, bringing stuff in line. I suspect the reason that they made Blackout Kick be the default, apart from just having it be there across all monk specs, and so that consistency, is also that we are supposed to be able to use 2 one-handed weapons now, as well as a 2-handed weapon. I know for well, there you go. It doesn't work. I do not have that ability. It doesn't work right now. Doesn't work. So there you go. But that is, I believe, the intention, that all monk specs will be able to dual wield one-handers or use a two-hander. Obviously, it didn't work for Windwalker. It doesn't work for Brewmaster, but I think that's part of why you have Blackout Kick, so they don't have to do a dual wield Blackout Strike animation as well. That's my thought, but I think, you know, it's fine. I think it's a nice enough little change. And then another perk is Zen Meditation rank 2. Level 56, Zen Meditation will no longer be cancelled while moving. So that makes Zen Meditation a lot more useful. Obviously, you could use this to deal with dots or magic damage. Melee attacks interrupt it. So you can kind of use it in some kiting situations. Being able to move while you're doing it is certainly a very welcome change. So yeah, that's kind of a nice little perk. Make Zen Med more easily usable, and make more plays that you can make with Zen Med. So there are the baseline ability changes. For the talent tree, the Brewmaster does have several changes here in the talent tree, actually. So first up we have, well, at level 30 we have a few changes, of course, because our brews have changed. So light brewing will now reduce the cooldown of purifying brew and celestial brew by 20%. So bringing it from a 13-second recharge and 30-second recharge down to 11-second recharge and 24 seconds. So some quick playing with this feels really good for celestial brew, because celestial brew is so strong. With purifying brew, it can be a bit weird, and you're kind of just consuming charges of purifying brew kind of for the sake of it, even if there's not much stagger to purify. So just bear that in mind. A little bit strange. Spitfire is there. That's a bit strange too. And then Black Ox Brew, I think this is also changed. Obviously it is. It's a 2-minute cooldown. You chug some Black Ox Brew, which instantly refills your energy. Purifying Brew charges and resets the cooldown of Celestial Brew. So this is actually, I think, a very, very attractive cooldown now for some burst protection. Particularly because, again, Celestial Brew is such a good chunk of mitigation, and you're really relying on that to keep you alive during magic. This gives you an extra reset on that to deal with the big burst of magic damage coming in. So this could be good. We'll have to see. At level 40, still the same. Level 45 has obviously here seen some changes. So special delivery. Drinking from any brew has a 100% chance to toss a keg high into the air that lands nearby after 3 seconds, doing 250 damage to all enemies within 8 yards, reducing their movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds. This doesn't work. So if I drink, well, let's get in combat with him. If I drink my Celestial Brew, where's my special delivery? 100% chance. It's not there. It doesn't work, right? But again, this could be kind of nice for some consistent AoE damage, and mostly for the slow, right? It's the slow effect that I think is the appealing thing. Rushing Jade Wind is obviously a super popular talent pick for BFA. Just fits into your core rotation every 4.5 second cooldown. It gives you this buff for 8 seconds that will just do damage over time. This does now have a target cap, so that could perhaps make it a little less appealing, a little less of a must pick in Shadowlands. We'll have to see. And then, seeing as New Zao is now baseline, Exploding Keg, which was the former artifact ability, is coming back as a talent. So this is a 1-minute cooldown. Hurl a flaming keg at the target location. Right, I can choose the location. A 40-yard range, doing 1,300 fire damage to nearby enemies and causing them to miss their melee attacks for the next 3 seconds. So not only is it a potent AoE damage cooldown, but it's also a potent survivability cooldown, kind of buying you 3 seconds to catch your breath. It does have a very slow travel speed. Like, it takes its time. That's a beefy keg, you know what I mean? That's a beefy keg. But, I mean, it looks fun. Kind of nice to have that come back. So yeah, that's what that talent here is looking like. I think you're really looking at level 45. It's like, do I want consistent AoE damage? Do I want the slightly less consistent and maybe slightly lower damage? We'll see what the tuning is. Do I want like the more passive version that's not part of my rotation, but also does have the big benefit of a very substantial slow, so useful for some kiting strategies? Or do I want the big 1-minute cooldown, like big CD, burst AoE damage, and kind of the big burst defensive benefit? Which one of those do I like the most? That's sort of the decision there on level 45, which I think is pretty cool. And then level 50, high tolerance is the same. We have a new talent called Celestial Flames, which also doesn't work. It doesn't work. But drinking from brews has a 30% chance to coat the monk with celestial flames for 6 seconds, increasing the damage reduction of Breath of Fire by 5%. And spinning Crane Kick will also cause a Breath of Fire on target. So that's really interesting, right? Really interesting. Get higher uptime in Breath of Fire. I mean, as you can see, there's no Breath of Fire here. If I Breath of Fire this guy, you can see the Breath of Fire is still only making them do 5% reduced damage, but this certainly could be pretty cool, right? This certainly could be pretty cool. You know, just an extra constant 5% damage reduction with your Breath of Fire. Spinning Crane Kick could become a really powerful AoE thing, so we'll have to see how this works. Like I said, and as you just saw, it does nothing right now, so can't really tell you how good this one's going to be. But I mean, it could end up being kind of nice. Might make Spitfire better. We'll have to see. And then Blackout combo has been slightly changed. Obviously, worth noting that Blackout Kick has a slightly longer cooldown, so that will affect the value of Blackout combo and make it slightly worse. So the effects that it does right now, anyway, a Blackout Kick will increase the next ability, empower your next ability. Tiger Palm, double damage, Breath of Fire, cooldown reduced by 3 seconds. Keg Smash, reduce the remaining cooldown of your brews by 2 additional seconds. Or Celestial Brew will pause stagger damage for 3 seconds. So that's what Blackout combo does. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it works out. But that is, they're the talent changes for the Brewmaster. That's what you're getting. Then for the big new Shadowlands features, the first one I want to look at here are the Conduits. Conduits are going to slot into your soulbinds. I'm not going to cover soulbinds in this video, but you can see an example up here behind me of sort of, I give you an idea of the path you can take through the soulbinds, and you can see the different empty conduit slots. You can slot them in. There's Endurance Conduits, which boosts survivability. Finesse, which boosts your utility. And then Potency, which tend to boost your damage, that sort of thing. So let's dive in. First up, let's check out the Endurance Conduits. So there are 3 generic monk ones available for all monk specs, and then 2 which are Brewmaster specific. First up, we have Fortifying Ingredients. Fortifying Brew grants you a shield equal to 5% of your health for 15 seconds. Looks like this can scale up to 20% of your health bonus. So, I mean, that's kind of nice, you know, an extra shield effect on Fortifying Brew. That could end up being, you know, a relatively nice perk for us and make that cooldown more powerful. Grounding Breath, when casting Vivify on yourself, its heal is increased by 10% and it has a chance to refund its cost, and that can scale up to 25% increased healing on yourself. So this could also be somewhat useful in the niche circumstances of like doing some kiting and self-healing while kiting. We'll have to see if that ends up being all that useful. Obviously in a raid fight, probably not that good, but perhaps in Mythic Plus you could do some plays with it, so interesting. Harm Denial is the third one of the generic conduits. Expel Harm's healing is increased by 20%. That scales up to 35%. Again, I already said this with Expel Harm. It's massively undertuned right now, so we'll see. Well, I mean, this is useless right now, but I'm presuming that Expel Harm should get a big balancing pass to actually make it fit. It doesn't fit for any spec right now, so yeah, there you are. For the Brewmaster Monk specific endurance conduits, we have Celestial Effervescence. While under the effects of Celestial Brew, your effects that heal you are increased by 20%, and that scales up to 35% bonus. The Celestial Brew, right now, certainly from my testing, like it's such a powerful shield that this tends to kind of last most of its full duration. Like it lasts 8 seconds, and you're gonna get a good chunk of those 8 seconds out of it. So this could end up being, you know, somewhat decent. I mean, it's most of your healing spheres, really. And I'm not sure. I haven't been able to test this. I'm not sure if this affects your what, you know, the one, I can't remember the ability name now off the top of my head, but where your allies' heals, you know, have a chance to heal you for more based off what, crit strike or something. So yeah, maybe this could be good. I'm not sure, but certainly worth bearing in mind that as of the tuning right now, Celestial Brew does last most of the time that it's up, so maybe you could play around with this. Then we also have Evasive Stride. Shuffle grants your stagger 5% additional effectiveness, and this goes up to 20%. So this seems rather mandatory, I would think. Yeah, I don't know, like this just seems extremely mandatory, so I guess plan your soulbind trees to always have this slotted in. I think so. For the finesse conduits, there are 4. Dizzying Tumble. Targets affected by your leg sweep do 5% less damage for 5 seconds. That goes up to 20%. So this is really good for the Brewmaster Monk, because obviously you have very much control of this, and you're going to be the one that's going to be taking the damage in Mythic Plus. So a very nice one there. Extra damage reduction. Very, very cool. Lingering Numbness, then, when paralysis ends, your target's movement speed is reduced by 60% for 5 seconds. That goes up to 90% slow. So, maybe useful for some kiting stuff. This seems like more of a PvP thing for, like, in particular, Mistweavers and Windwalkers. So I'm not sure how useful this will be for a Brewmaster, but you guys can maybe think of some creative uses. Swift Transference, then. Transcendence Transfer increases your movement speed by 10%, and that can go up to 25%. I'm not sure how long this lasts. I mean, let's presume it lasts something like, 5 to 10 seconds or something like that. So you can transfer every 45 seconds. I mean, this is quite a niche thing, but again, for Mythic Plus, certainly you could do some kind of cool and kind of fun little plays. I think it could be interesting, right? Some extra, even more tools in the Monk kit for doing some interesting kiting plays. And then finally, Tumbling Techniques. Blackout Kick has a 5% chance to grant you a charge of roll, and that can go up to 20% chance. So just, again, more consistent mobility coming in. That's really awesome. Lets you roll a lot more in fights, in dungeons. That's going to feel, I think, really, really good. For the potency conduits, as a Brewmaster, you only have 2 potency conduits. Tank specs are more about the endurance conduits. So you got 2 endurance conduits and 2 potency conduits compared to, Mistweaver, Windwalker, for example, having just 4 potency conduits, right? Anyway, the 2 for Brewmaster and potency are Scalding Brew. Keg Smash does an additional 20% damage to targets affected by Breath of Fire. That can go up to 50%. So this could actually be quite attractive. To get a good chunk of extra AoE damage out. Mythic Plus, doing more damage, that can always be really important, so cool there. Walk with the Ox, then. Abilities that grant Shuffle, reduce the cooldown on Invoke Nuzao the Black Ox by half a second, and Nuzao's Stomp does an additional 10% damage, and that will scale up to 25% additional damage on Nuzao. So this definitely requires some testing, so obviously your Keg Smash, your Blackout Strike, and your Spinning Crane Kick trigger Shuffle. So all of those will give you half a second cooldown reduction on Nuzao. I think this is really nice, actually. Nuzao, obviously, is not only an offensive cooldown, he's doing good damage, but he also is a defensive cooldown by taking some of the stagger damage onto himself and off of you. So this could be a really good one for Mythic Plus, definitely. I mean, just more AoE damage from Nuzao, that's great. More uptime on Nuzao, so even more AoE damage and, yeah, more defense. This could be a really good one, so one to keep an eye on, and we'll see how it actually, how useful it actually ends up being with tuning. For your legendaries, then, as the Monk, we have 4 generic legendary powers, though one is still coming soon, so we only have 3 right now. And then there are 4 Brewmaster-specific legendaries as well. Let's look at the general ones first. So we have Fatal Touch. Touch of Death's cooldown is reduced by 60. This is obviously pretty nice. I mean, Touch of Death is a fun ability, does plenty of damage, so this could end up being good. Of course, Touch of Death for the Brewmaster specifically does essentially clear all of your stagger, so maybe it could be useful. It's definitely going to be kind of fun, though. Invoker's Delight is up next. You gain 12% haste for until cancelled after summoning your Celestial. So this one seems rather work in progress. Let's presume it's 12% haste while your Celestial is out. So for the 24 seconds of Invoke Nuzao. That could be good, possibly. Like, we have the Conduit to reduce his cooldown. More haste in the cooldown is going to be relatively okay. I think this one is not as exciting as it is for, certainly for Mistweaver. If they go for Invoke the Red Crane, Invoke Chi-Chi, or as good as it would be for Windwalker. It seems like fairly underwhelming for Brewmaster, but maybe it will turn out okay with tuning. Maybe. We'll keep an eye on it. And then finally, Roll Out. Roll has 1 additional charge. Yeah, I don't know. Good for clearing old transmog raids. Not going to be, I think, too relevant at all for any actual progress content. So there you are. For the Brewmaster specific legendaries then, so these are maybe the more interesting ones. First up, we have Face Palm. Tiger Palm has a 10% chance to do 300% of normal damage and reduce the remaining cooldown of your brews by 1 second. So we'll see how this works out. I mean, the 10% chance seems relatively minimal. And the extra damage is okay. It's more the cooldown reduction of the brews that's appealing. I mean, I guess if you average it out, it's that Tiger Palm will, on average, reduce the cooldown of your brews by 0.1 second, which seems kind of meh. So I'm not sure about this one. This doesn't strike me as being too good. Might need some extra tuning. I mean, we'll have to see, but not too excited by that yet. Flaming Kicks is up next. Your Breath of Fire ignites your right leg in flame for 8 seconds, causing your Blackout Kick and Spinning Crane Kick to do 30% additional damage as fire damage and refresh the duration of your Breath of Fire on the target. This one, I think, is a lot better. This one is really interesting, and especially with the Celestial Flames talent, the new talent we can take at our top level talent tier, where your Breath of Flame damage reduction, or Breath of Fire damage reduction, excuse me, is more powerful. This could be kind of nifty, you know, like, especially when you're, you know, if you're in a difficult mob pack and you're doing some, you know, difficult kiting stuff and dealing with all the abilities from a mob pack, it might be kind of hard in those circumstances, you know, to actually keep Breath of Fire, or to hit every enemy with Breath of Fire. And this one certainly has the effectiveness that, well, if you're spinning Crane Kick, is going to refresh the Breath of Fire. It becomes a lot easier then to actually maintain that dot on multiple targets, even if they need to be spread out by Ring of Peace and so on. So that could have some actual genuine gameplay usefulness, on top of the fact that, I mean, setting your right leg on fire is just kind of cool. And yeah, compared to Tiger Palm having a chance to do more damage, this is affecting Blackout Kick and Spinning Crane Kick, which actually do like decent enough damage, certainly for Spinning Crane Kick being a spammable AoE ability. That doing 30% more damage as fire, that's kind of awesome. So yeah, this one to me looks fantastic. Next up we have Mighty Pour. This one seems bugged. Iron Skin Brew increases your armor by 30%, has a 1% chance not to consume a charge. I'm not really sure how this is going to work. This seems super bugged, so yeah, we'll come back to that one. Obviously Iron Skin Brew no longer exists. Presumably this will apply to either your Celestial Brew, it might give you like, or it could apply to your Purifying Brew. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, the concern for me is that if this procs off Purifying Brew, sometimes with the Purifying Brew, it can be, you know, you're kind of using it for the sake of it. You're not really taking that much damage. You're just keeping the charge rolling. So I don't know. We'll see. It increases your survivability, so one to keep an eye on. Storm Stout's Last Gasp then. Keg Smash does 30% additional damage and has 1 additional charge. Yeah, super fun, right? Super fun. Gotta love it. More Keg Smashes. Always nice, bearing in mind that, you know, the extra charge, that's something you can use for, it gives you more cooldown reduction on your brews. So that's awesome. You could save up a couple of charges, like in a raid when you're in tank swapping and stuff like that. You could go into actually tanking with 2 charges, you know, pop your Celestial Brew, do a couple of Keg Smashes in a row, and yeah, that's a nice bit of cooldown reduction getting you towards your next Celestial Brew, which I think is pretty cool. It's going to feel great in AoE, more charges. Awesome stuff. It's going to help you like aggro multiple packs of mobs like at the time and group them up. It's just super good. Really nice one to see there come back. Very, very happy with the Storm Stout's Last Gasp. And then the final piece of the puzzle, the final big chunk of extra power that we're going to be getting in Shadowlands is, of course, the Covenant abilities. First up, let's check out the Kyrian abilities. Their signature is Summon Steward. Call your Steward to bring you a Phial of Serenity. And this is essentially like a health stone. You have 3 charges, and you can use 1 of the charges for each combat encounter. And this is quite cool. It only restores 15% of your health, which isn't so amazing for Brewmaster. We don't have as much health as other tanks, for example. However, it does remove all curses, diseases, poisons, and bleed effects, which is quite nice. I will say that, you know, as a Brewmaster, you can already dispel those things. So you can already kind of deal with the poisons and diseases, right? But, I mean, you could always, you know, if there's going to be AoE poisons or diseases, you could dispel your ally and then use the flask to dispel yourself, which is kind of nice. Your dispel could be on cooldown. And of course, you know, curses and bleeds we can't dispel, and those can be pretty dangerous. I think this one's looking to be quite good, actually. You know, we're fighting a bunch of vampires in the raid, and we're fighting a bunch of undead things, so all of these effects I think are going to be quite common at the start of Shadowlands, so looking pretty decent. The Covenant ability for the monks is called Weapons of Order. It's a 2-minute cooldown, and for the next 30 seconds with this, your mastery will be increased by 15%. Additionally, for Brewmasters, it will reset the cooldown on Keg Smash, and enemies that are hit by Keg Smash will take 5% increased damage from you, stacking up to 5 times. So, kind of nice, right? This is cool. So, Mastery is affecting your dodge chance as a Brewmaster, so this essentially functions as a sort of a defensive cooldown. You're just going to dodge more abilities, and that's always pretty good. And then resetting the cooldown on Keg Smash, you know, it's just going to up your AoE damage. It's applying, you know, a damage increase with the Keg Smash, so yeah, there is a mild defensive benefit to this, which is nice, and we don't have a lot of defensive cooldowns. You know, nowhere near as much as like a Prot Paladin or Prot Warrior. They have more defensive cooldowns, whereas we're more about the consistent Stagger and Celestial Brews. So this is kind of nice. I think it's pretty good. And more damage, yeah, I think it's fine. It's not going to, I think, blow your socks off as much as it will for the Mistweavers, for example. But it's a cool cooldown. Yeah, a cool cooldown. Works pretty well. The conduit for this is called Strike with Clarity. Weapon of Order's duration is increased by 5 seconds, and the mastery bonus is increased by 35%. And that mastery bonus can scale up to 20%. So I think then it becomes starting to look really attractive, where you're going to be getting absolutely tons of dodge. And yeah, I think that makes it, you know, you're starting to get to kind of crazy levels of mastery with that. So you could do some really fun stuff, I think, with, you know, you could, again, with the damage increase and the Keg Smash resets, you could potentially do a quite substantial AoE pull, start doing lots of damage in AoE, and have that defensive mastery to help you survive through it. So yeah, certainly with the Conduit, this starts to look more appealing. So there you are, the Kyrian ability. Next up, we have the Venthyrs. And for the Venthyr, their signature ability is Door of Shadows. Wends through the shadows, appearing at the targeted location. This has a 1-minute cooldown, 1.5 second cast time, and 35-yard range. So it's a point-and-click teleport. I don't know. This one is obviously this is amazing for a class like a paladin, which is super slow. For a monk, it's not quite as good. I mean, you'll still have uses for this. You'll still be able to think of ways to do it. Useful for some kiting as a tank in Mythic Plus. Possibly useful for some Mythic Plus skips for avoiding mechanics in fights and that sort of thing. So it will have its uses, that's for sure. Although, you know, the thing for the monk is you're already very mobile. You're gonna have roll. You're probably gonna have Tiger's Lust. You have Transcendence. So you already have quite a few tools. So we'll see how useful it actually ends up being for the monk in practice. I'm not sure. The Covenant ability then is called Fallen Order. You open a mirror for 24 seconds, summoning reflections of your orders, Fallen Ox, Crane, and Tiger Adepts, and it should summon about 1 every 6 seconds. It can summon Fallen Monks of the Ox style, that will attack with Breath of Fire. It will summon Monks of the Crane style, which will heal with Enveloping Mists. And it will summon Monks of the Tiger style, which will attack with Fists of Fury. So this one it has a 3-minute cooldown, by the way. The ability is a 3-minute cooldown. So it's okay. I think that it's guaranteed to summon. I think 6. I think it summons. I think it's 11 monks total, I think is what it summons. And 6 are guaranteed to be for your spec. So for the Brewmaster, that's Breath of Fire. So that's not actually that useful. I mean, it does have some synergy again with that Celestial Flames talent, where your Breath of Fire gives you more damage reduction, but you're probably going to be keeping Breath of Fire up relatively consistently yourself, so I don't think that's that useful. I mean, the Tiger style, the Windwalker monks doing Fist of Fury, that's pretty good damage. Mistweaver ones doing healing, the Enveloping Mist, that could be pretty good for some extra survivability. This is a bit of a weird one. It's a bit fire and forget. There's no really interaction. It doesn't really affect your gameplay. And I guess that's sort of the appeal of this, right? This is a button that you're going to press if you want to just press a button and not really have to think about it. Just every 3 minutes, I press this button. They're going to come in, all these monks zipping around. They're going to look kind of cool. They're going to do their thing. And it's just a benefit, and I don't really need to care. I think that's the appeal to me. Not very appealing to you, though. It might be great. Up to you. The Conduit, though, is called Imbued Reflection. And again, that builds on what I was just saying. Fallen Order monks do 20% more damage and healing. That can scale up to 50%. So, again, no real gameplay here. It just makes it way better. So, yeah, there you go. Quite a passive one. That's the Venthyr. For the Necrolords, their signature ability is called Fleshcraft. Form a shield of flesh and bone over 4 seconds that prevents damage equal to 20% of your maximum health. This does have a 2-minute cooldown, but the shield itself will persist for 2 minutes. Although, of course, as a tank, it's going to be consumed within that time, you know. Channeling near a corpse will claim their essence to grow the shield up to 50% of your maximum health, and this is more effective against powerful enemies. So this one I think is relatively niche. Obviously, it does have some uses. As the tank, especially as the Brewmaster, where you want to be dodging quite a lot, you can't dodge and parry and stuff when you're channeling, so difficult to actually use this in combat. You're probably much better off just doing your core rotation and reducing the cooldown on your brews than channeling this. This could actually be a dangerous thing to channel if you're actually actively in combat with stuff. It could be another tool, though, to add to your kiting toolkit, like dash away and channel Fleshcraft. Just have that big shield up to help you deal with stagger, like if you need to kite because you have really high stagger and your other stuff has been used up. It could be useful for that. Could certainly be useful between packs in dungeons, to channel it. Once you kill a pack, channel near their corpses, get that 50% maximum health shield, and then pull the next pack. Or even do like a fairly risky pull, like pull a couple of packs where you're far away from your healer and could be in danger. This will make it easier. So definitely there are some creative uses for this, but just beware of the fact that I think in combat, like if you are toe-to-toe fighting like 5 mobs or something, channeling this could actually be bad, so just do bear that in mind. The Covenant ability then for the monks is called Bone Dust Brew. This, you will throw a brew created from the bones of your enemies at the ground, coating all targets struck for 10 seconds. This has a 1-minute cooldown. Your abilities have a 15% chance to affect the target a second time at 25% effectiveness, shadow damage, or healing. So pretty much just shadow damage. For the Brewmaster, your Tiger Palm and your Keg Smash, while this is active, will additionally reduce the cooldown of your brews by 1 more second when you strike guys with your Bone Dust Brew active. So, I mean, I think this could be kind of okay in AoE, actually. Like, you throw it down. If you're hitting multiple enemies with your Keg Smash that have Bone Dust Brew on them, you're going to get a bunch more cooldown reduction. You could Tiger Palm some guys. I think that could be kind of cool. I mean, a little bit awkward in the sense you probably want a spinning crane kick, but you'll probably just Tiger Palm instead for the duration of this. So it will certainly help you get higher uptime on your core defensive cooldowns, and it has a relatively short cooldown. So this one is not too bad, I think. You know, it's more appealing for the Brewmaster than it is for either of the other monk specs. The other monk specs is quite underwhelming. But for the Brewmaster, it's a short cooldown that's going to give you kind of some consistent benefit to your active mitigation, and that's kind of nice. The conduit for this is called Bone Marrow Hops. Bone Dust Brew's shadow damage or healing is increased by 20%, and when Bone Dust Brew deals shadow damage or healing, it reduces the cooldown of it by half a second. And the bonus to the damage and healing can increase up to 50%. So, I mean, the shadow damage bonus isn't all that substantial. Like, it's a nice perk, but it's not game-breaking. I think definitely the cooldown reduction here is what's appealing. Because if you can get enough cooldown reduction out of this, I think it's going to feel pretty good, right? You're going to have a very short cooldown ability. That's, you know, it's a good AoE ability, and that's going to really increase just the core uptime of your active mitigation brews. Even your defenses, like Fortifying Brew, it's even going to affect that. Quite frequently. So this one actually could be solid enough for the Brewmaster, although if you want to multi-spec into the other monk specs, it's not looking so hot for them. But certainly for Brewmaster, I think this could be a solid option for a fairly consistent benefit in AoE. And then finally we have the Night Fae. Their signature ability is Soul Shape. You turn into a Vulpin, teleporting 15 yards forward and getting 50% increased move speed. This lasts for 12 seconds. And has a 1.5 minute cooldown, and while you are a Vulpin form, you can reactivate that blink, that 15-yard teleport, every 4 seconds. It becomes an ability called Flicker. So that's kind of nice. You know, it's a very, very big mobility thing. I mean, could be useful for aggroing a bunch of packs in Mythic Plus, could be useful for kiting. I'm sure you can think of some uses, although, like I've already said, the Brewmaster is quite a mobile spec already, so that does limit its usefulness a little bit. But then the Covenant ability for the monks is called Feline Stomp. You strike the ground fiercely to expose a Feline for 30 seconds, doing 60% attack power nature damage, and for the Brewmaster, igniting enemies with Breath of Fire. While you fight on the Feline as well, while you stand on the Feline, your abilities have a 10% chance of resetting the cooldown of the Feline. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. They really, really like the Breath of Fire effects for the Brewmaster. They're really trying to push it. Like I said, I feel like it's relatively easy to keep uptime on the Breath of Fire stuff. This could be more useful, again, like I talked about with the Legendary, because this also applies the Breath of Fire effect. It could be very useful if you have mobs that are spread out and you can't necessarily hit them all with your Breath of Fire cast. So I think it's a bit useful in that sense. But this should just be, you know, it should be consistent AoE damage is basically the name of the game with this one. That's most of what it's doing. In fact, that's all of what it's doing. It's just going to be consistent AoE damage, a short cooldown. You should be able to arrange yourself to fight on the Feline quite frequently, so you have a good chance to reset it. And yeah, it's just it's you know, it's more AoE damage on a short cooldown. That's how it works. The conduit for this is called Way of the Fae. Feline Stomp does 10% additional damage per target, up to a maximum of 50% additional damage, and that scales up to about 25% additional damage per target hit. So I mean, yeah, I mean, it just comes down to tuning. I mean, there's no real particular defensive benefit from this one. It's just more AoE damage. Obviously, in single target, it's a bit underwhelming, very underwhelming, in fact. But for AoE, it's gonna be really good. So yeah, there you go. They are the Covenant abilities for the Brewmaster Monk. So those are all the different pieces of the Brewmaster Monk on the Shadowlands. How's it looking then? Is the spec any good when we consider all the new additions? Are they worthwhile? Yeah, is this looking like a spec that you should pick up and play? Yes is the answer. I think for sure. I had an absolute ton of fun playing as the Brewmaster. This is such an enjoyable tanking class. It feels phenomenal. I had just a great time playing with it. For me, I personally really like the changes to the active mitigation for the Brewmaster. That's something that kind of put me off before, you know, like just maintaining Ironskin Brew, that just seemed like a bit of a hassle. So I really love how that's just a baseline passive thing with Shuffle. And now your active mitigation has quite a bit more thought going into it. Certainly with the Celestial Brew, that has a ton of gameplay there. It does feel very powerful. Although, again, one note of warning is that you do feel a bit squishy when you don't have that active. We feel very powerful when it's up. So if you loved the very, very, very extremely steady damage intake of the Brewmaster in BFA, I think it will be slightly more spiky in Shadowlands. Personally, I think that makes for more fun gameplay, more intense gameplay, and I think that's good. But on top of that, though, I mean, the Brewmaster, I think it's a spec with really cool utility, you know, with Ring of Peace, with all of your rolls, with your transference, your transcendence, with your clash ability now as well. Like, there's a lot of ways to sort of interact with mobs and to kite mobs out and to do quite fun stuff. Like I was doing quite a bit of kiting, for example, in the dungeons as the Brewmaster, and waiting for that Celestial Brew to come back, and it felt really good, actually. Like, it felt very interactive, and I enjoy as well their core gameplay rotation. I think that's really, really good. Yeah, I mean, Touch of Death as well coming back as well. That's also a very fun little perk. It does a ton of damage on boss fights. So it does feel like this cool extra bit of utility, this uniqueness that you do bring as a monk now. I think their Covenant abilities aren't the best. The Brewmaster Covenant abilities aren't the best. You know, a lot of them are just kind of doing a bit of generic, more AoE damage, which is a bit underwhelming. I probably lean towards the Kyrian one the most because it is going to be like a fairly substantial defensive CD with that 30 seconds uptime on a 2-minute cooldown. I think that's going to be kind of enjoyable to play around because you don't have many big CDs as a Brewmaster. So I quite like that. And also, you know, the Summon Steward, the Flask, being an extra defensive little bit and an extra like self-purify for those effects that it gets rid of, the Curse, Disease, Poison, and Bleeds. I think that's going to be pretty nice. Like, that's the one I'm most attracted to. The Venthyr one seems quite uninteractive, so that puts me off it. The Necrolord one actually does seem good for Brewmaster, but it seems so underwhelming for the other monk specs that I probably avoid it just because of that. And then Night Fae looks visually amazing, although it's mostly just doing more damage, which isn't the most amazing thing in the world. I do think that the Brewmaster Legendaries are looking fairly solid as well. There's a couple that are kind of weak, but you've got a couple of good ones in there. I like the one with the flaming kicks, setting your leg on fire and doing more damage. That's going to be pretty cool. And I do like, of course, you know, more charges of Keg Smash. That feels good as well. Yeah, I mean, I think you put it all together, the Brewmaster, it's a really fun spec. It's got a fun damage rotation. I think the active mitigation has been very much improved. And yeah, I mean, new Zao coming as an extra cooldown is awesome. I think the new Covenants, particularly the Kyrian one, looks good. Legendaries are fine. The Conduits are pretty decent as well. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good spec. Will it be as overpowered as it was in raids in BFA, where it was like kind of a mandatory tank for most of BFA? Will it be that OP in Shadowlands? I'm not sure. Like, the active mitigation changes could affect that. I certainly still expect it's looking pretty strong, I think. I mean, it sort of comes down to tuning, but you know, and that still has to happen. There hasn't been proper tuning passes on the beta, proper balancing passes, so stuff could change, of course, and they could always, you know, update the spec a little bit, of course. But the core takeaway, the core thing that I feel right now, having played the Brewmaster, is that it remains an extremely, extremely enjoyable tank spec with a fun rotation, fun abilities, fun utility. I think this one is a blast to play, and you're going to have a great time if you pick this one up. So yeah, definitely I can endorse the Brewmaster here on Shadowlands. And thank you guys for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.